Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. We are here to help you understand the unique cultural needs of Gen Z and Generation Alpha. I'm your host, Chuck Peters, and I'm so glad you're here today. This is the Etch Next Gen Ministry Podcast. As leaders, it's so important for us to make sure that we are refilling and refueling our minds and our hearts with information and insights to help us do what we do better. Readers are leaders and leaders are readers, my good friend J.E. says. And we're going to talk today with Jeremy Echols, who leads Next Gen Ministry at the Glade Church. Jeremy's had a long history leading Centrikid camps at Lifeway, and he and I have had a long time friendship. When I thought about what are the books that I might recommend or that we might recommend to you listeners to have on your shelf, books to read and reread, books to share with your team, there was nobody better than Jeremy Echols to come and join the conversation to help make some recommendations. He and I have each brought a list of our favorite leadership books, at least a few of them, that we're going to talk about right now to give you a list of what should be on your reading list. Check it out as we talk with Jeremy Echols. Jeremy Echols, man, I'm so glad to have you back on the Onto the Etch podcast. We've talked before, several times now, I believe, in different settings of different podcast episodes. But one of the things that I think about when I think of you is that you are a reader. And I know that you've got kind of like a famous little catchphrase. You and I were talking before, and I used this. I said, I've heard this somewhere. And I'm like, I think I got that from you. And so your phrase is, yes, leaders are readers.
Leaders are readers, and readers are leaders. I don't know where I got that from. I feel like that may be a John Maxwell type of quote. I didn't come up with it, but man, I have owned it. And yes, I love to read. I read a lot, and a big part of that is certainly for spiritual growth and discipleship, but also leadership growth and growing skills and skill sets. So I'm excited to talk with you today. Thanks for having me back. It's always an honor to be a part of the podcast with you, Chuck.
Well, you are definitely a leader. You have led many people in many settings. You're a great developer of leaders. One of the concepts that I have from one of the books that is in our list we're going to get to is that leadership is really similar and connected to discipleship. As we disciple people, we bring them up to be leaders. And really, as leaders, we should always be developing ourselves in how we lead, but also developing everyone around us on our teams to elevate them to become future leaders. So there's lots of strategies and tactics and approaches and ways of doing that. Some people have a natural kind of bent towards being a good leader. But for a lot of us, we need to get ideas from someplace. And there's a lot of places to get them. But one of those ideas is in this old-fashioned relic-y kind of thing that they have, that it's a bunch of paper that's knit together with a cover on a book. It's a book. And it's kind of crazy, right? That books are still such a thing. So in a world, let me start by asking you this. In a world where I have podcasts and, reels, little short snippets and sound bites and things, why do you think that there's still such value in a good old-fashioned book?
Well, I think there is a lot of value in books. Now, I could go either way on physical paper book or digital book on my iPad, reading through a Kindle app or something like that. I feel like those both work for me. I know there are some people that are very much the efficiency, got to have it where I can carry all my books on one device. There's other folks who love the purist of like the smell and the touch and the texture. Yeah. I really go either way on that, but man, I really do lean into books. Not necessarily over short form things like podcasts or snippets or shorts. Those have a place to maybe spark an idea.
Sure, yeah.
But a book is still really relevant because it requires focus. I think it requires a commitment on both the author and the reader. Like an author has taken time to go deep on a subject matter. And that makes a world of difference when they're spelling it out, thinking it through, going through the editorial process, all of that to put something into a book to deliver that. And on the flip side, the reader, when I pick up a book, I know that someone's put a lot of thought into this. This isn't just a quick hot take online. This is something that is thought through and developed, and it requires a commitment of me. Now, Chuck, I'm curious to know from you, are you a completionist or do you
Oh,
sort of sample a book?
yeah. I
I
was
have a
hoping you
hard
wouldn't
time.
call me out on that on the
Oh, I'm
episode.
sorry. It's
So
not
no,
a
no,
call
it's all
out.
right. No,
It's
but the
not a call
reality is,
out.
I know that you, as a person, like JE, you always want to be super well prepared before you come on a podcast. And oftentimes, I just need an outline, and I'll work from the outline, right? And so the blanks get filled in as we go, and we figure it out as we run. So my confession for you and to the listeners, I love books in that I want to have them on my shelf. I want to be able to open it up, dog ear a page. I'm all good with highlighting a book or with writing in the margins and things. So I do prefer a physical book in that way. I'm a great book starter. I'm a terrible book finisher. So I find it's just part of me being me that I have a hard time getting through 300 pages of something, but I really value the processing the concepts that are in these
Hmm.
books. So I've got a big collection of books on my shelf where maybe some of the pages haven't been turned, but I want to be able to be conversant about all the concepts that are in those books.
Oh,
So
that's
I have a
interesting.
harder time with maybe it's my ADD. I don't know. I have a harder time actually finishing the books, but I can get excited about a new one really quickly.
I have a hard time putting one down, even if I determine that it's bad.
Man, I
So
love that.
I am such a completionist when I get into a book. And so my wife, my pastor, like I've had my dad, they have said it's okay to put a book down. And I find
You're
that
like, no, once
hard.
I start, I'm in.
Like I want to power through this thing. And maybe part of it is also I keep a track of, list of books that I've read, within the year.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to add it to the list. And I feel like it's disingenuous if I add it to the list, but I didn't complete it. And so there's a funny insight into my personality there. But that's
Well,
interesting, Chuck. I think both are valid
yeah.
because I've powered through some things at the end, been like, that wasn't the best, but I completed it, and that was important to me. And for you to be able to be able to sample, and there's times where I've sampled a book and then just chosen not to read it because I feel like I got what I wanted
Yeah.
from the table of contents or from the summary or whatnot. But yeah, there's more than one way to approach a book, and I'm glad we got into this, not to call you out, but to say
No,
this, it's
but you know what?
valid
There's a
either
lot of
way.
people like that. So,
Hmm.
as we engage in an episode that's about books, there might be people who just say, you know what, I like books, like me, but I can't finish one, and so maybe this episode isn't for me. No, 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 it is. It's absolutely for you because the takeaway here is not that you have to be a finisher like you are, right? Who's committed to it, although that is a wonderful thing. And if that's who you are, listener, read the whole book, every page, every word, get it all. But even if you're not, there is so much value in the concepts and the content, the
Hmm.
strategies that are documented in so many books that have been written by such wise leaders, such wise people, that we would be crazy to ignore all of that, right? And some
Hmm.
of it you just can't get from a soundbite. You need to go deeper. All that said, I'm a huge fan of audiobooks. So, like, I love to listen while I drive. And so that may be a real audiobook, a full audiobook, or it could be excerpts from that book, like from somebody's YouTube recap of the book. There, you choose any one of the titles that we're about to talk about. There's probably 90 YouTube videos about each book where you can click on that and you can either hear John Maxwell himself or somebody else who's summarizing what they learned from the book. And all those concepts are so valuable. So, however it is, listener, that you best ingest the content. And so, JE,
Hmm.
what I'd like for us to do is, I know that we've both brought kind of I asked you bring a list of a few of your top recommendations of books that leaders might read. And I did the same. And so we haven't really compared. We may have a little bit of like peeking over each other's shoulder and kind of knowing what's in each other's hands. But I thought we could just run down some books that have been meaningful to you that you would recommend, and I'll do the same. So
Man, that sounds good.
who wants to go first? You want to rock, paper, scissors for it?
Okay, here we
Ready?
go.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Oh, scissors, scissors. Oh no, one more time. Ready? Quickly. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Rock, rock. Oh, ready?
You go first. You
One
go
more time.
first.
Ready? Rock, rock, paper, scissors, shoot. I got scissors. You got rock. You're up. That's a very camp in next gen way of doing that. All
Yes,
right,
make
you
it
go
fun
first.
for sure. Well, we've mentioned the name a time or two, so my first one's going to be a John Maxwell book. This is John Maxwell, 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Good one.
This is the one I'm holding in my hand is the 25th anniversary edition, and we don't have to put ages or numbers on this, but I actually do have the original edition that came out in 1998. That was one of the books. The reason this is on my list at the top of the list is this is a book that a leader of mine, a camp director I was a camp staffer and a coach, but my camp director put this book in my hands and said, I see leadership potential in you. I want you to read this and let's talk about it. And so that was a foundational start of my leadership journey that was so meaningful and so valuable. This book, though, goes through his 21 irrefutable laws and just simple leadership principles, but also practical illustrations and ways to understand them. A couple of the laws that jump out to me, just to give you a sample of what this is like.
It's all formatted like he's got like the law of blank.
The law of
right?
the process, for instance. And so the law of process is leadership and leaders are built daily, not in a day. And that concept I've just held on to that from my own journey and passed that on so many times of, man, we can't just snap our fingers and instantly become an excellent leader. It requires the daily commitment to character and to discipline and to growth, being a learner, which is a lot of what the intro that we've talked about is about. Be a learner, be a student of books, whether you take them in whatever format or not. But that process, it happens on a daily basis, not in an instant. And so that's one of the laws. Another law, the law of attraction. You're going to attract things that are similar to you, and also a leader who is maybe on a scale of 1 to 10. A leader who's a 2 or a 3 is not going to be able to attract 9s and 10s to follow them. And so you've got to raise your lid. There's another law, the law of the lid. You got to raise your lid. And there's things you can do to help grow your lid, your leadership lid. So this book, I've just rattled off, a quick synopsis of a very brief synopsis of 3 of the laws that he touches on. But I found this book to be very practical. It helped me. I mentioned 1998, summer at camp, having this book in my hands, I began to grow. Also, through the years, I have led my teams through this book in small group type setting or one-on-one setting where we read 2 or 3 laws and then come back together in a couple of weeks and talk about them. And then we read 2 or 3, come back and talk about them. So this is one that is very applicable. And then it'll just help a seasoned leader walk through it with a leader who's a step behind them in the journey. So this is why I put this on head of my list.
That's a great one. That's that original one with the red cover and the black band. You're holding it up right now. Those who are listening only, you can't see that. But I have that same book on my shelf. That is a classic, and it's a great one if you've not read the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And they're irrefutable, so you can't argue with that. I like how Maxwell put that right in the title. These are irrefutable. There's a couple other laws in there, JE, that have stood out to me over time. One of them is the law of respect, which just says people naturally follow someone who they respect. Right? I talk a lot about trust, respect, and influence as key things for us with the kids that we influence, kids and students, with the volunteers that we lead, with our other co-workers and staffers. We need to be people who are worthy of respect. And when people trust us and respect us, we will gain influence. One of the others is the law of influence. That's another one of the 21 laws. The law of influence that says the true measure of leadership is influence, not power, not other things, right? Or impact. It's influence.
He makes a bold statement that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Like it all boils down to that. Yeah. And I think that's so practical for our church leaders. There's a lot of people in my church who wouldn't say, I'm a leader and I'm going to lead the charge on something. But I would say leadership principles are important for every single one of us because we all have influence in some manner. Some may have a greater measure of influence. Chuck, you lead all of Next Gen Ministries for Lifeway. So you lead a lot of people in that organization as well as have impact and influence throughout the nation and the world. a leader here at our local church may not have the type of reach or impact that you do, but yet they can still grow in their influence in the spheres of where they have leadership. That's what leads us to be able to share the gospel and use evangelism as our influence and our relationships with people. So this book is, it's not overtly Christian, like this is not a Bible study type of book, but it is by a Christian author, and he definitely shares from his Christian experience. I think that's noteworthy. Some of my books are from Christian authors, and some are not today. So I don't know about yours.
So and maybe we should say for the record, what we are recommending today is that these are good reads with great principles for leading and for developing leaders, right?
Yes.
So for being a leader and developing a leader. We're not saying we endorse everything and anything that all these authors have ever done or written, or even maybe all the words in every book, right? But we're pointing leaders towards good leadership resources that have been helpful to us. So yeah, Maxwell, very deserving of being high in the charts. So since we're starting with legacy titles, I'll go my first legacy one, and I wasn't sure what order I was going to share these in, but one of the ones that I reference regularly, I'm sure I've mentioned it multiple times on the podcast, often talking about certain concepts from this book in conferences and with my team. And that's going back to the old classic, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So this is Stephen Covey. It's not, again, this is not a ministry book. This is a secular book on how to be an effective person. But there's so much great content in here about what are those habits that we can invest in, that we can develop. And so a couple of them are, being proactive rather than reactive. One of my favorites is beginning with the end in mind. And that's one of those concepts that has been transformational for me, right? The idea that as we start into being a good starter, but not a great finisher, even with reading a book, if it's a project or an initiative, whatever it is, we need to have a clear vision at the beginning of what we're trying to accomplish. And then we can backtrack to say, okay, what are the steps that get us here from there? Maxwell didn't use this, or I'm sorry, Covey didn't use this in the book. Maxwell didn't write this book. Covey did not use this analogy in the book, but it's one that I have superimposed, is GPS, right? With our GPS, it'll tell you exactly how to get where you want to go. It just won't tell you where you're going. So you have to enter a destination to get started. And so that idea for us as leaders, that we need to know from the onset, what is it that we want our kids and students to know before they leave our ministry areas? What are those outcomes that we want to pursue? Then we can make a great and a wise plan to get there.
I think that's so insightful. And if you aim for nothing, you'll hit it every time. And so beginning with the end in mind drives you to not just say, we want to be ministry minded or gospel focused, or even like we just want to be good or be excellent. Be excellent at what? Be gospel focused toward what end? It helps you to do the discipline of finding something to aim for. I think that's so important. I think it's in 7 Habits, Chuck, is also you got to inspect what you expect. Does that ring a bell from this book? I think that's in that one. I feel like that was a takeaway I had from the Stephen Covey book that you brought up. That is a classic. That's a good one.
And one of his other ones that is so key for us, I think, in ministry is, I think he calls it putting first things first. But the concept of the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Such a simple habit or practice, right? But it's so easy for us with all the things that pull us in 100 different directions to lose sight of what really matters. And so for us as leaders, to be clear-minded about what is the core purpose that we are here to accomplish, right? Is the gospel. It's connecting kids with Jesus. That's our goal. Everything else that we should do should line up around that one clear, specific goal. And so that idea of doing what's most important first, separating urgent things from important things, keeping our focus on the important and not being distracted by urgencies that come. All of that stuff is such a great help. So there's just a few of those 7 habits. That's a great read. By the way, listeners, for your sake, I know you may or may not have these books. These are all things you can get on Amazon or on thriftbooks.com. I have found, JE, one of the things that my wife Chris and I like to do is thrift. She's a huge thrifter. So wherever we go, if we're on vacation or if we're at a soccer game out of town, she's like, hey, maybe we can hit a thrift store. Well, she's looking around at all the different things. There's always a huge book collection at thrift stores. And
That's
I
right.
have numerous books that are in my list and on my shelf that I got for 99 cents or for $2.99 off the shelf at a Goodwill. Right. So you listeners, I'd encourage you, keep your eyes open for these titles. However you get them, you don't need a huge budget. Just keep your eyes open and see what you can find.
That's right, man. That's well said. I love where you were going as you were wrapping up with Covey and the 7 Habits of the main thing. The main thing that leads me to my next book. And as you're saying, sequence. I actually had this one second, but it segues really well. Main thing of so much of what we're doing is spiritual leadership. And so my next book title is called Spiritual Leadership. And this is by J. Oswald Sanders. This one is a classic for me. The subtitle here, Principles of Excellence for Every Believer.
Yes.
I read this book shortly after walking my team through 21 Laws of Leadership of Maxwell, and just the season of life that I was in at that time. I read this book, and it was touching on so many of those similar leadership principles. At the same time, it wasn't business or marketplace examples, it was biblical examples. And so this challenged me to grow spiritually as we look at Peter and Paul and other leaders and other examples in the Bible. But spiritual leadership, this is I think, a solid blend of studying and getting into the word as well as growing as a leader. And it truthfully, it stepped on my toes on both accounts. It challenged me to grow after I got over my toes being stepped on. It really caused me to grow. And guess what? Shortly after that, I walked my CentriKid team through this book together also. Yep. So this is one that we've walked through together. And there's a chapter, I think it's very early on, maybe one of the first couple of chapters is about ambition. And we had a very robust discussion about ambition, and that can be a healthy thing. Sometimes, and I remember one of my teammates saying, man, I feel like ambition is like a negative thing. Like if I have ambition, I'm not being humble, and I shouldn't like have ambitions. And this was such a great discussion brought on by this book about how we can have ambitions, but we want those to be holy ambitions. We want to be ambitions that point us toward the Lord, not towards self-centered things. And so this one, gosh, it gets into prayer, just insights from Paul's leadership, from Peter's leadership. As I thumb through this, responsibilities of leaders, it gets into the art of delegation. Yeah. Chuck, I still am struggling with delegation. Even when you and I served together years ago, I always had a hard time letting go of things and passing that on. But this book dives in on that from a leadership and a spiritual perspective. So this is one I wanted to bring and share with our listeners
this
today.
This one was on my list also. This is one of those ones that we both had. So good. I had a couple notes on this one too. So you've already covered how he uses the examples of Paul and of Peter. One of the core principles in the book is about servant leadership, that leaders are servants. And there's a whole section, I think it's chapter 5, where it talks about, let me see if that's not right. Chapter 3, the master's principle, where he talks about leaders don't lord over their flock. They nurture and they lead them, right, with gentleness. And so spiritual leadership requires sacrifice, and it requires suffering. And he points out some examples of what a servant leader looks like. So he talks about needing total dependence on God, working for God's approval, having modesty, empathy, and sympathy. Optimism is a trait of spiritual leadership. Man, it's so easy for us to get pessimistic or even maybe realistic. Maybe we are pessimistic, but we call it being realistic, right? But we can be pessimistic about things, but optimism is a characteristic of a godly leader. And then just the fact that the anointing of the Holy Spirit over each of us as leaders. So yeah, spiritual leadership, J. Oswald Sanders, another great one to pick up if you don't have it.
This is so old, Chuck. It's I flipped in the inside cover. I think I have a 2007 edition. I believe there's a newer one than this, but this is original copyright 1967.
Yeah.
Very old book, very timely still today.
Yeah. Another good one. Put it on the list. All right. Speaking of another good one, my next one on my list, again, this is not a Christian book, but good to great by Jim Collins. This one, it comes back to, one of the things I called out on the 7 Habits book was keep the main things to keep the main thing. Jim Collins talks about the hedgehog concept, right?
Yes.
Where he said, we need to think about what is it that we can do? And he's got some questions that he asks that we all need to ask within our teams and our organizations. He uses a business angle on this, but honestly, the business of ministry is something that we all need to be focused on too, right? The main thing. And so he talks about asking the questions, what is it that we can do better than anyone else in the world? What is our passion that drives us? And then what drives our economic engine, right? Is that other piece. And he has that Venn diagram where those things overlap.
How those overlap.
Find the center of the target so that we can have clarity of purpose. So Good to Great, it talks about what it means to be a level 5 leader. I don't know if you remember that part of it. I know that you've read this book. I'm sure it's on your shelf too.
Yes, this book was hard. You go with the level 5. Let me I'll come back after. Go ahead.
Okay, so he talks about, there's different levels of leaders. There are skilled workers, that's a level 1. There are reliable teammates, that's level 2. There's visionary leaders who are kind of looking ahead, that's a level 3. Then there's those who lead with, humility and resolve. But that level 5 leader is somebody who really models personal humility, who has resolve around getting the work done, but puts others first, that builds not just momentary wins, but builds enduring greatness in the organization that leaves a legacy and creates a sustained success. Is somebody who's not about the organization, or it was more about the organization and the mission than they are about their own advancement. So there's so many things in that as I read that, it makes me want to think and move and operate as that kind of a leader.
I wanted to, sorry, I interrupted a moment ago, but I want to give an aside on this book for our listener. As you pick this up, a couple of things. You may say, man, all the companies that he references in this, they're very different now than they were then. This was written at a point in time, but it's still okay. I think his principles are still so solid. Also, for the leader who's like, man, I'm into how do they get into the research of this? This book is very much statistical and driven. I got buried. This one took me a long time because it was a slower read for me because he really goes into his research and his statistical analysis and stuff that I felt slowed me down. Although it interested me, it slowed me down. So this is one where I confess that I like to complete all the way through a book. This is one where even I would give great permission to read that first part of that chapter and skip through if you get bogged down and just don't dig the stats, you can still get the meat of this book if you skim through and skip some of that. Jim Collins, actually, I like to listen to him more than I like to read his books. So he's one that I'll seek out interviews and podcasts and capture the gleaning from him. He's so wise. But this book, man, this is a classic for sure.
So this is a good place for me to share another one of my little secret insider Chuck tips, things that I do that I'd recommend that if your brain works more like mine than JE's that you might do, or even for JE, who knows? So I keep a spreadsheet. The answer to everything is a spreadsheet, right? Spreadsheets are a gift from the Lord, but I don't use them the way most people do. I like to take notes in spreadsheets using the fields where I can have, point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of this book. That's the outline and subpoints underneath. And I keep a spreadsheet that I call book notes. And I have probably 40 different books that I have a tab for each of those books. I drop in a picture of the cover, and then I pull out the big takeaways. Some of those are takeaways that I've gotten myself from reading the book, others that I've gotten from executive summaries online or listening to an interview where I was like, oh, I want to extract I want to get the juice out of the squeeze. I want to get that juice and capture it somewhere. So even as you're talking about your books, I'm clicking through the tabs in my spreadsheet in real time so that I can say, okay, what were those things from the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership that stood out to me? Well, I have that because I keep this spreadsheet where I have all my little notes and things documented in one place. So that's a little secret of how I do it.
That is excellent. I have similar. Man, mine's not as comprehensive as what you've got, Chuck. I'll use Apple
It's not
Notes,
as impressive as
but
it sounds.
but I
However, it
like
looks
what
in
you
your
do
brain,
with.
it's not quite that fancy, but it does the job.
But the cover, I throw the cover in an Apple Note a lot of times, and I'll jot down either notable
Yeah.
quotes from a book or chapter headings or things that I wanted to catch up with. I'm not as consistent with that as I ought to be. A lot of times I have to go get the book, undo it, and like my next one that I'm going to talk about actually has a whole bunch of tabs where I've tabbed, within the
Oh,
book, and
right.
so. But a lot of times that's where the physical book is beneficial because I've got my notes in the margins, and my notes, are things that are flagged. But if I'm doing a Kindle book or something, that's where I'm always going to that Apple Note to capture those things or whatever. So funny,
Uh,
you mentioned a way to track your notes, and I hadn't even thought that we'd talk about that today. But I
and
do a
I think the
similar
big
but different
takeaway,
approach.
yeah, the big takeaway, listener, is find a way that works for you. Right. For if it's if it's putting tabs in the book or writing notes on the page, or if it's keeping a spreadsheet where you have it all, accessible and searchable or whatever else, do whatever works for you, but invest energy into gleaning insight from books like these. All right, JE, what's your next one
Okay, my
with your
next one.
tabs?
This is Pat Lencioni, Four Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive.
This is a newer book.
This is an older book.
Oh, it's older. Okay.
This is old. This is an old one. I'm looking for a
Okay,
year.
that's not one that I have seen before, so I'm going to put that on my list of books to check out.
Like the year 2000. This is an
So,
older book.
okay, so it's a bit old. So, okay, tell me the
But
title again one more time.
Four Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive. And
Okay, great.
so I don't think of myself, nor have I ever thought of myself as an executive. So this was a little bit harder one for me to pick up. But what got me was Pat Lencioni, the way he writes his books. I think he does all of them this way. There may be some of our new ones that are different, but he always writes more like a fable, like a story,
Yeah,
where you meet real
it's
people
like
in
a
a real company
narrative.
and you kind of
Yeah.
see their dialogue and their interpersonal challenges that kind of draw out the leadership principle. And then at the back of the book, he breaks it down and gets more specific, after he sort of tells the fable. So this one begins with a fable, like a lot of them, has a sort of a narrative. But then in the back, building and maintaining a cohesive leadership team. These four principles are what got me to go dive in on this book. Number one, build and maintain a cohesive leadership team. That's step one. You got to put the team together. And this probably gets into some of, the concepts, even like Collins, about getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. I think that's a Jim Collins quote there.
Yeah.
But you build that team. Then you create organizational clarity. Step two. Step three, over communicate organizational clarity.
Yeah.
That really drove home with me of like, why is he making two of his steps basically the same? It's so important to create that organizational clarity. And then you reinforce organizational clarity through your human systems. So this is one that is more for you, the leader. This is a little, you could walk this through your team if it was a situational type of thing, but this is more of a invest in you as a leader.
Yeah.
And how are you looking at what you're trying to accomplish? In our case, in my case specifically at a church, what are we trying to accomplish? Then how do we build out our teams and have the clarity that we need to actually accomplish what we're trying to accomplish? And so with this, that create organizational clarity, and then the next step being over communicate organizational clarity.
Yes.
This is one of those where so many times we say something and we feel like because we've let everybody know, then we're all on the same page, and it just doesn't work that way. And then sometimes in our church, maybe we say, "Hey, this is what's really important to us," but all of our systems and the way we have our people organized say that other things are more important. We might say discipleship and sharing the gospel is the most important thing. But then all of our things kind of look like, and the way we're structured looks like we're really more about putting on weekly events or seasonal events. And so this is where having that leadership team that helps drive you in the direction and the organizational clarity continually reinforced. Those were my big takeaways from this book by Lencioni. I haven't read a bad Lencioni book. Now, if any of my
Yeah.
Central Kid team from back in the day are listening to this, they know I would sometimes get on a rant about I don't always love the narrative and the fable at the beginning. I would sometimes be like, "Can I just get to the meat of this?"
Yes.
But those are really helpful, and the narrative does help with some folks who may say, "Look, I'm not a leadership book reader." well, putting it into more of a story form personalizes and kind of embodies some of
Yeah,
those
and it feels like a
concepts.
case study, or like you're
And it
looking in
makes it
on
a
what
little
happened
more,
with these other people to see how these principles played out. Yeah.
it makes it more approachable that way. And so, so this is one of those where it's helpful to kind of know what you're getting into. But man, it's a quality book, quality read.
Good word. Yeah. So Lencioni, this book was not one that I intended to share, but we'll just do a quick nod to one of his newer books is the Working Genius model. And so that's a book. This follows a similar approach with some
Hmm.
storytelling, but what it gets down to is understanding how the different members of your team think and work and how they go about their work with some things that are their genius areas, their frustration areas, and then things that are sort of in the middle. And it talks about wonder. It spells out the word widget, those 6 things that the people that you have, and every one of us is a mix of these, where we have 2 of these genius areas and 2 as frustration areas. And by understanding this, it's super helpful. So he spells out the word widget. It's wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, uh, enablement, and then tenacity. And so, as you understand that different parts of a work process require skill sets on one end for a lot of creativity and new ideas and that wonder and invention side, but then to actually give them legs and make them happen to hit the deadlines and the goals and take the steps requires galvanizing and enablement and tenacity to get those things done. This is a book that I would recommend for leaders who are leading a team of people. It's a little bit, well, there's a lot of self-reflection in it, introspection to figure out what you are. And when we acknowledge that we have weaknesses, we can look for other people who can offset those. We have actually used actively these different categories within our team. It's now
Oh,
part of
wow.
our language where we say, okay, this is the wonder phase of the project. And so those people who are skilled in that wonder and invention kind of maybe lead out in some of that. And then there's a time to stop reinventing, lock that stuff in, galvanize it and say, this is what it's about. And then we move towards doing the hard work of enabling other people to take it and go. That's delegation involved in that. And then the tenacity to see it through and get it done. So that's not one that was on my list of my top ones, but it is something that we actively use and that I highly recommend.
I think that principle is so valuable of having you use the phrase, this is now common language and
Yeah.
familiar language with everyone on your team. That's what walking through these books is valuable for. You're probably, if you're a leader of multiple people in a team, you're probably going to have someone else who's a reader. You're probably going to have someone who's like, another book. But if you can navigate through that together, then you've got common language. And there's a really valuable conversation by saying, hey, Chuck, what energizes you about getting into a project? And what is a pain point? What does make it hard? Because your things may be different than my things. And it may be that you need someone who can just sit at a high level. And we sometimes, I say we because this is telling of where I sit in this.
Right.
We sometimes can be like, that person's just so high level, they don't understand all the details of what it takes to get this done. But I need high level people to say, hey, look at this.
Big
And
picture
then
people.
those
Yes.
people need me to go make it happen and need a
Yes.
person that's wired with more of a detail mindset and a get it done mindset. And when we can then, as a team, put all that out on the table, it's freeing first off, because sometimes we feel like we need to sit in a room and be all of those things and be excellent at all of them. Sometimes we
Yeah.
feel that pressure. Other people may sit in a room and feel like they're just not any of those things. They're not good at any of them. And that's not going to let a team move forward. But when we can get it on the table and be like, hey,
Yeah.
if I take this and I do this part, then other people can say, I'm so glad. That's a relief because I don't want to do that. Don't, and that, Chuck, I've told you before, please don't make me go lock me in a room and say, come out with the next big thing. Like that's terrible for me, but you would love that. You'd love to just be sitting in a room thinking of the next big
For some
things,
people, it's depleting, and for others, it's energizing, right? And
but
even
getting
just
that out.
realizing
And that's
that is important.
that's where a book like this is so helpful. That's why I continue to ring the bell of do this with your team, whether it's literally walking through it chapter by chapter.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's read the whole thing and let's come back and discuss. And in other cases, it may be you reading it and processing it, and then just dripping some of that out to your team in a smaller basis. And so there's more than one way to accomplish that, but that gets you that shared learning and common language, which are so valuable.
One of the things I love about the Working Genius is it points out that every person has an area of genius. Everybody. So if you have somebody in your team who feels insecure or doesn't really know what they bring to the table, this is a way that you can call out value in every person. And even for us as leaders, we may look around at people on the surface and say, I'm not really sure what to do with that person or where they do fit. And when we can, or we have an opening and we're looking to hire somebody, what skill sets are we strong in and which ones are we lacking in? Maybe we want to look for a person who brings something that we're missing. One of the things I love about the Working Genius book is that it also has an assessment. Several of these books have different assessments attached to them to help you determine where you fit. And so the Working Genius has an online assessment, and it'll give you a readout where you can put your whole team in, and it'll show you how each of you rank, and therefore it helps you figure out how you work together better. So that's a great book for leaders. That wasn't on my list though, so I'm not going to count that one. That's a bonus book. The next one I have two that kind of go together. So I'll do one and then I'll let you do one and I'll come back to my other one. So these two are ones that in my life are points of tension as a leader. So the one I want to start with, and again, this is a little bit of that confession, right? This is kind of that it's accountability as I share this with you and with the listeners. And so this is John Mark Comer. He's got a book that a lot of us have heard of, but not everyone has on their shelf or has read, and that is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And this is written from a Christian perspective. And what he talks about is the problem that we have in our culture of always being in a rush. We're always running, always racing from thing to thing. And that's not healthy for us. That's not how God intended us to live and to operate. We become so driven by whatever it is that we're chasing that we miss out on quality of life, on health, on good relationships and successes. So he talks about the problem of hurry. Comer defines hurry as a constant striving to do more in less time. And it's a mindset that he sees as the great enemy of the spiritual life. And I think a lot of us can relate in ministry and elsewhere in our lives to feeling like we are always hurried. And he talks about how hurry damages our relationships, our spirit, and takes an emotional toll on people. And then he gives the solution to that is, and I love that he uses 4 S's. It's one of my love language to start things with the same letter. So the 4 solutions that he offers are 4 disciplines that I can actually work on these, right? And so these are silence and solitude, Sabbath, simplicity, and slowing. And so those 4 things, the way that I'm wired is to race, run, and not catch a breath and then crash, right? At some point in time, you just can't continue at that pace. And so these reminders for me, but also, Jeremy, for the people I lead, right? Because what happens is if I'm wired this way, even if I don't place that as an expectation on my team, when they see that I don't take a break and that I'm always racing and rushing, that they would assume or presume that I expect that of them.
Yes.
And so this is one of those things where we as leaders need to model a healthy balance of work-life balance. We talk a lot about in different places, but those ideas that the ultimate goal is to live like Jesus, to create intentional rhythms, and to experience a deeper life.
I love that book. That is on my reread list right now. My wife actually found John Mark Comer, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, before. She's the one that put this on my radar.
Yeah.
She read it and said, you need to read this. So I did. I read it over, I think like a Christmas holiday 3 or 4 years ago. And yes, the silence and solitude and just slowing down. And so this is one that I have gone, and it's actually in my book stack again to reread again. I have not gotten to the reread on this one, but John Mark Comer,
I
it's
may need
so
to reread it
approachable. It
also.
is it's challenging without guilt tripping. But
Yeah.
but he does not pull any punches as far as being challenging. And so it is so good. I would like to say we and speak this over everybody, but I probably need to just own it and say I am. When the busier I am, the less spiritually focused I am,
Yeah.
and I would like to say the busier we are, the less spiritual we are. But I don't know that everybody's that way. But that is absolutely the case for me. This book really helps call that to the front, and in a healthy, holy way, cause us to examine that.
So right before I came to record the episode with you this morning, I had my annual doctor's visit, which I always have to look my doctor in the eye. And when they say, "Are you eating right? Are you exercising? Are you doing these healthy things?" And I'm like, not like I should, but I know what they are, right? I know the right things to do. I just need to do them. This is one of those things for me. This book just kind of punched me in the nose with a reminder that the pace of the world, and we just did our Etch conference, we talked about the velocity ministry at the speed of culture, that we are not meant to look like the world or run like the world, right? We're going a different direction. And so although life comes fast and the culture is moving quickly, we need to move with a different velocity, speed, and direction, a different velocity that is not chasing after the same things. And it's such a good reminder for me to be reminded of that importance of silence, Sabbath, simplicity, and slowing down. It's so much healthier, and it sets us up for a longer impact in the work we do. All right, I know I was going to go to you, but I'm looking at the time. I have one other book I want to throw out. So I'm going to do that.
Go
And then
for it.
I'll
I
give you
can't
the
wait.
last word. So get ready for your last word. So this is the one that competes with that for me, because I think there's truth in both, okay? So we're just coming off the ruthless elimination of hurry. My other book that I recommend is this one called A Sense of Urgency. So it's by John Cotter, A Sense of Urgency. And in it, he talks about how it's so important for us to not fall into complacency, right? We can just do what we do every day where it becomes mundane and empty, and we don't have a compelling passion that we are pursuing. And so to maintain that balance between not being hurried or rushed or frantic, but also not losing a sense of urgency in what we do, especially for us in the church, right? There's urgency around the gospel. We don't know how much time we have. No matter how you read the end of the Bible, we are closer to the end times than we've ever been before, right? And so
Yes.
in that, Peter says, "How then should we live, knowing these things are going to happen?" Right? And so we need to operate with intensity and urgency and passion around sharing Jesus with the next generation. And we have to keep that sense of urgency front and center in front of our team. So the balance of those two books for me is one that's rather profound, and one that
Yes.
I wanted to call out for these listeners.
And that's where a lot of our walk as a leader and our walk as a person of faith is balanced with competing tensions. Like we do need to be urgent. We also need to slow down. And so, how does the Lord work that out in our life? And so, there's a lot of tension that you have to hold and begin to navigate as a leader. So, are we wrapping up, or we got one more?
I think we probably have to wrap up.
Let's
Producer
wrap up.
Donnie has not thrown anything at me yet, but I can sense him getting ready to pick up a rock and toss it this way. JE, man, thank you so much. I had no idea how much we would cover. I think we could probably do a whole other episode and continue on, and maybe we'll just have to do that. So hang on to those other books that you have.
Maybe we'll come back one day, but leaders are readers, readers are leaders, and the emphasis of being a lifelong learner. I think this applies to our tactical, practical leadership skills, how to lead a team, how to get stuff done. Like that's so important as a leader. At the same time, growing in our faith. I believe leaders are readers and readers are leaders of God's word as well. And so we dove into books, spiritual and marketplace books that are beneficial, but I think the word is above all. And so Chuck, I know with Lifeway, and my time of serving there, my time of now being a customer and a user of so many curriculum and products, we handle the word carefully and we treasure it, and we want to make that known to kids here and students here in the Glade Church. So Chuck, thank you for your ministry, thank you for your leadership, and thanks for a chance to come on and talk today. So this has been a lot of fun, and hope we get to do this again before too long.
Jeremy Echols, thank you for sharing some of your favorites on your list. I know that you have many more, and we will come back another time to get into some more of those books. And as J.E. said, listeners, above all, we need to be in our Bibles. We cannot be people who practice what we don't study ourselves, who preach what we don't live. And so we need to spend daily time in God's word. It's not enough to read it once and put it away or just have little nuggets and chunks. That's a book that we actually do need to continue to read cover to cover, to be immersed in God's word and saturated in it, because what we put in flows out. And so make sure that top of your reading list is spending your own personal quiet time, not just preparing for study. That's different, but to spend your own time with the Lord in his word so that you are growing and your own spiritual walk. And it's out of the overflow that you can lead others in your ministry. Jeremy Echols, thanks again for being here. Listeners, thank you. We'll see you back again soon for another episode of the Etch Next Gen Ministry Podcast. This episode of the Etch Next Gen Ministry Podcast was brought to you by our amazing team. Executive producer, Angie Elkins. Producer, Nikki Ogden. Edited by Colin Cruz. And recorded in the Lifeway Podcast Studio in Brentwood, Tennessee, with sound engineer Donnie Gordon. Artwork by Cameron Wilson. And I'm your host, Chuck Peters. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Etch.